Welcome to our April Planet Possible MiniPod. I'm Niki Roach, and this is a monthly update where we react to current events in water, climate and nature. It's a mini-pod because it'll only take about 15 minutes of your time, and it means you get a Planet Possible episode every 2 weeks. We're grateful to our sponsors, BMA, Mackley and MWH Treatment, for helping bring this mini-pod to you. As usual, I'm joined by an environmental expert and we'll explore 3 issues that are making the headlines, keeping you up to date with what's happening around the world and where my guest sees exciting possibilities. So this mini-pod, my guest is the CEO of MOSl, the market operator for the non-household water retail market in England, Sarah McMath. And MOSl enables more than 1.2 million business customers to choose who supplies their retail water and wastewater services. And today, we'll be talking about smart metering as an enabler to provide data for business customers to manage their water consumption, the tensions created by increased numbers of data centres in areas of water scarcity across the globe, and the future workforce of the water sector set against the challenge that 30% of colleagues will be retiring in the next 5 years. Let's start by talking about smart metering and the current lack of sufficient data to understand how much water business customers are using. Tell me more, Sarah.
Currently, there's a higher level of meters for business customers than there are for household customers, but the vast majority of those are dumb meters that are read in the majority of cases twice a year, and for very large users 12 times a year. But those meter reads currently are taken in order to provide timely, accurate bills for customers. We're already in an environment where we are challenged with water scarcity. It's really important that business water consumption is understood at a far more granular level. And in order to enable that, you need smart meters.
If we get to where you want to get to, which is more granular data on consumption through smart meters, what's the reason that that's beneficial for business customers and I guess more broadly?
So I'll give you 2 examples, maybe looking at both extremes of business water consumption. So for small business customers, their water consumption is very similar to household. So what they really need to understand is when they're using water and for what purpose. But really importantly, is water being used when it shouldn't be? So identifying customer side leakage. And the smart meter rollouts that we have seen in 2 regions, Anglian Water and Thames Water, are ahead of the game on smart metering in water, both for household and non-household. What they are seeing is that a lot of businesses have water usage during the night when they shouldn't. If I look at the other end of the sector, you would expect that some very large business customers would be using water 24/7 food production. And for those customers, it's more about understanding their water security and ensuring that they have sufficient water for their needs, in some cases 24/7. So what smart metering gives those larger customers is a real understanding of how they could work with either their retailer as the person who provides their retailer services or another organisation to potentially look at options to protect their water security. A really good example would be if I'm a 24/7 food producer, I need water 24/7, and potentially, if there is an unplanned outage, so say a burst water main, that can have a very real impact on my business in terms of shutting down my production line. Having something like on-site service reservoir could be a really good, potable water reservoir could be a really good solution for me. But at the heart of it, the main reason for smart metering is really just to enable businesses to understand what water they're using, when they're using it, and to enable those thoughtful conversations around, well, so what? Is there anything that data is giving them that can help either reduce their consumption or change their consumption pattern?
And is there anything planned to accelerate the rollout of smart meters? Kind of what's the hold up and is it going to happen, do you think?
So the really good news is that all water companies have got smart metering as a key part of their deliverables for the next 5 years. If I were to talk on behalf more generally of the market operator, we would like to see that quicker and we'd like to see that rollout front-ended because the benefits are very significant. There are currently 6 water resource zones where there is a moratorium on business water growth, so businesses cannot expand or new businesses can't connect to the system. And that smart meter data enables management of water resources in a way that can unlock the potential for economic growth.
That's really interesting that you've talked about that moratorium on growth, because that takes me on to the thing that I wanted to talk to you about, which is the news that Amazon, Microsoft and Google globally are planning to build hundreds of data centres. And something that I guess if you're not working in the sector, you might not have thought about is that they're really water hungry. At least 24 of those proposed data centres that they're looking to build globally are in areas of water scarcity. A couple of years ago, Microsoft said that 42% of its water came from areas of water stress. And in northern Spain, in Aragon in northern Spain, there is a campaign group which I think has got an inspired name in my dreadful Spanish, Tu nube seca mi rio, your cloud is drying my river. And they're calling for a moratorium on new data centres in northern Spain because of water scarcity. And I'm interested in particular because here in the UK, the government have set an ambition to be a world leader in AI. So we're seeing some of those same challenges already exist. We know we've got 9 new reservoirs planning to be built, but also I guess the thing that I think about often is that a single run of ChatGPT for 100 words of ChatGPT is half a litre of water. And when you aggregate ChatGPT up, it's the daily demand of Edinburgh is what it's using on a daily basis. So what are your reflections on those tensions created between ambitions to be an AI leader and then the water needs of those data centres?
I guess we've got these competing drivers. We want economic growth, and economic growth requires the development of more data centre capability, not just for the development of AI, but actually data centres are required for all sorts of services, including financial services. So I think data centres are an inevitable growth area. They're an inevitable part of our future, and therefore, as the water sector, we need to be working with the data centre sector to identify more sustainable solutions. And they are out there. Across the world, there are many countries who are more water scarce than we are, who simply do not allow data centres to connect to the potable water system. So that enables data centres to explore options, including far greater water recycling, the use of wastewater, treated wastewater effluent, the use of air cooling. The challenge is they're more expensive. And in a country like the UK, where our water is relatively cheap compared to other utility services, accepting that those prices have gone up this month, it is still relatively cheap, both compared to other utilities and also compared to other countries in the world. And in many cases, we allow bulk tariffs where large users, effectively their water gets cheaper the more they use. So there are lots of challenges around, there simply isn't a price incentive for data centres or any other large users to really focus in on water consumption. Smart metering helps that, but it is also really important to understand the real value of water. And in many cases, we will get to a point where it's not a question of whether or not water company can connect a new data centre or other business. It will be they simply don't have any water available. And we're already in that situation in some parts of the country. So I think there are some really interesting innovations in this area. So there are data centres who are looking at far greater water recycling. They're looking at where they locate the data centres in order to have the maximum opportunity to utilise wastewater effluent. And they are looking at air cooling, albeit that being a more expensive option. The other really important point about data centres is that they're now critical national infrastructure, which means in a scarcity situation, in a drought situation, the data centres will keep running, even if a water company needs to restrict water consumption by other business customers and other domestic customers. So my view is we need to accept that data centres are part of our future, and as a sector work with the data centre sector to explore more sustainable options into the future. Final point on data centres from me, I, maybe naively, before I went to visit one in Slough, thought, well, why on earth are we trying to build these very water intense industries in Slough, Cambridge, areas of the country where we know we've got a water scarcity challenge? Why don't we just go and build them in Newcastle? And something I learnt was that actually, not for all purposes, but for many purposes, the data centre actually needs to be co-located with what the data is being used for. That's not true for everything. For AI learning, it could be anywhere. But for financial services and for a number of other applications, the data centre does need to be physically co-located with what it's being used for. So it's not as simple as, which maybe I was naively saying, just don't build them in water scarce regions. That's not the whole answer. One area which I think is fascinating in understanding the value of water is looking at the cost of not having water. So the largest food producer in England has 24/7 plants that they operate. Currently, their water bill is about 1/100th of their total utilities bill. So with a total utilities bill of about £114 million, their water bill is £1.2 million. There is literally no financial incentive to focus, even with the best smart meters and data loggers in the world, there is currently very little financial incentive to look at reducing their water consumption. And in many cases, they don't want to. They know they've got a tight process. They know they don't have leakage. But if you flip it over the other way and say, well, what if you had to shut down your factory for 24 hours and couldn't run it because you simply have no water for product, whether that's a food producer or a brewery? You start to get into numbers which are way bigger than their annual water bill. So the cost of not having water is, for me, the more important question than focusing in on the current cost or price of water.
Well, let's pivot from that one to the third topic that we wanted to talk about. And for your kind of what's possible topic, you want to talk about the opportunities to bring more diverse voices into the water sector to help tackle some of the big challenges we've just talked about and beyond. So tell me more.
I guess it goes back to it's sort of the definition of madness to ask the same people the same questions and expect a different answer. But we currently have a workforce that is not very diverse. 30% of colleagues will be retiring in the next 5 years. The majority of those retirees will be white men, and those white men have a huge amount of knowledge and experience and understanding of how our sector operates. But we need to ensure that we have a pipeline of people joining our sector who come from different backgrounds, different genders, different ethnicities. And we're starting to see that, which is really exciting. All of the data says that a more diverse group of people will not just make better decisions, but organisations who have more diverse groups of people making decisions make more money. So this is not just a moral imperative, there is also a financial imperative. So when we start to look at these challenges around economic growth, around water security, for me, it's sort of a no-brainer, a logic that says, well, we need to get more people in the room. We need to be having more open conversations.
And you're obviously CEO of an organisation. So how much are you living and breathing what you've just talked about, Sarah?
We are now 50-50 on gender. We have a board which has a female chair, obviously a female CEO. Over 40% of our colleagues are not white British. So we are very different. We're only 90 odd people. I genuinely believe that we make better decisions as an organisation as a result of having that diverse workforce. But we haven't set any targets. What we've done is create an inclusive workplace where people can join us, they can thrive, they can be themselves, and that enables more people to join us and be part of that inclusive environment. The only point at which I've set targets is when we're recruiting through a headhunter, we don't accept any shortlists which are all white men. In some cases, the white man may be the successful candidate through that process. In many cases, they are. But we ensure that we have a diverse group of people from whom to select the right candidate.
brilliant to hear it, and I hope that more follow suit, really, Sarah. But I hope that's given you plenty to think about, and if you want to find out more about the topics that Sarah and I have talked about today, then we'll pop some links into the show notes. Thank you for joining us on the MiniPod. You can subscribe to Planet Possible on your usual podcast player to never miss an episode, and join our mailing list to be the first to hear about new episodes, and there's a link to that in the show notes too. That's it, everyone. Stay curious, stay connected, and we'll see you next time.